So It Follows. I feel like this is one that I have wanted you to watch for ages and we've just never got round to it. And I'm quite glad that we've done it, around the same time that we
Yeah.
watched Smile.
Yeah, I've heard people talk about this movie for a long time, and you've mentioned it on numerous occasions as well. But I had no idea it came out in 2014 or 2015. Like to me, it
Yeah.
feels like it came out like maybe 2 years ago.
Mm,
And a part of me is still like in the hype of this movie.
right.
Yeah, I didn't realize it. So many years had passed between
Yeah. I
then and
mean, I
now. So
remember watching it at uni. So that's how I know how old it is because
oh my
I was at
gosh.
uni when
Okay,
I
yeah.
watched it.
Goodness gracious.
It
Okay.
just shows how young I am.
There we go.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is one of those films where I actually want you to start because I have some thoughts watching it the second time, which like differ from the
Uh,
first time. So what were your kind of overall thoughts of It Follows?
I mean, in kind of summary, I thought it was really well shot, and I enjoyed the movie. Like, I enjoyed it right through to the end. And I don't know, just from the title, It Follows, I was expecting it to be some kind of cheapo, kind of
Mm,
shallow, kind of horror movie, and I was fully up for that. I was, fully prepared. But this
yeah.
movie was so much more competent than I expected, like leagues above what I expected. And I mean, I thought it was well acted. I thought the story was pretty good, and I don't think you have to kind of dig that deep to
No.
find what the subtext
Yeah.
behind it was. I think it was like the first note I wrote when I when I was writing my notes. I mean, jumping straight into it from what I took from the movie, I'm guessing it's going to be exactly what your take
Yeah.
from the movie was, but I'm assuming this movie was about STDs.
Yeah.
And so the actual infection being or the STD being the It Follows creature or ghost or whatever it is that follows the person.
Mm.
So anytime, so someone who's afflicted with this It Follows demon or whatever, the only way they can kind of get rid of it is by having sex with someone else, and then
Yeah.
that person then gets the It Follows demon chasing them, and that's the only way they can kind of get rid of it. So it kind of creates this long chain of people that have to keep passing it to survive. And but however, if the person who has it dies, it then reverts back to the previous victim. The beast then chases them, and it is, to a degree, I think it's a metaphor for STDs.
Yeah, I think it
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah, I think you're right. It's barely a subtext, and it's almost like the plot of the film is about
Yeah.
STDs. Like,
Yeah.
it's very overt. But you know what? I don't mind that. I don't think
No.
everything has to be
No. No.
shadow and clouded. And I mean, what I like about I love that it's shot. Only looking at teenagers or young adults. You're looking at kids who are just finding themselves and starting to be sexually active, and like it's quite
Yes.
there's a lot of feelings that go with that. There's excitement, there's shame, there's embarrassment, there's loads of things that go with being
Yes.
a teenager and kind of starting to date and things like that. And so I think it's about STDs, but it's also about teenagers having their sexual awakenings and them
Yeah.
starting to learn about what it means to be responsible, because you have to be responsible as an adult if you're kind of having sex. And I think that this film does have a really good way of showing that. And, if you do get an STD, it will follow you. And, they do. What I like is even if you pass on the demon, you can still see it because others can't see it, but you can still
Yes.
see it. So there's always a bit of it still with you. Even if you kind of cure it in quotes, it's always with you. So there
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
lots of bits that are very,
Yeah, but
overtly.
it's this kind of almost irresponsible. I mean, if you want to take the message very literally, it's a very irresponsible way to treat STDs, like rather than
Yeah.
curing it and treating it.
Just
Yeah,
pass
you
it on.
just pass it on to
Yeah,
someone
yeah,
else, and I suppose if you have it long enough and it catches up with you, there is a very real risk where it, due
yeah,
to complications, it could kill you. And
yeah, yeah.
but yeah, yeah. I mean, what did you think of the? I mean, generally, I mean, that's the message we've spoken about. But what did you think of the story? Were you okay with it? I mean, just yeah.
Yeah.
What did you think?
I mean, the first time I watched this film, I thought it was really cool and really scary because I've never seen this kind of demon before that's
Yeah,
so ominous in the way that it does what it says. And that's what I like about the title as well. It follows. It's literally all it does. It just
yeah,
follows you. It
yeah,
doesn't run, it doesn't scream, it doesn't disappear. it's just always there in the background. And I thought that concept was really scary because it's quite real in the sense of you could be looking down the street and then you see somebody kind of walking straight towards you and being like, oh, this reminds me of that film. And so it's very creepy, and the premise of it is really different. And, you know, I hadn't seen Smile. Obviously, this came out before Smile. So even though there are other films like it that we've seen where you're kind of catching something, where you have to pass something on, I just thought the idea of something walking towards you wherever you are in the world and it will just keep walking is super creepy. I think watching it the second time, it did made me, I wasn't as scared because I'd seen it before. And I don't know whether this is just one of those films where you can only really watch it once, because once you get the kind of creepiness and how different the story is, that's kind of it. And it's a great film, and I completely agree with you. It's very indie, it's very kind of Sundance. I feel like the colors are very, you know, almost like film photography. It's very well shot, and we can talk more about the way that it's shot as well. But there are scenes that you can tell have been put together with a lot of thought, and they're not just the bog standard horror film scenes. And so I really appreciate that, and I think that's what helps it stand the test of time. But I do think that on watching it the second time, the scariness goes away a little bit because you get it. So like I said, it might just be one of those films the way you watch it once and that's it.
I agree with you, because like a movie where I feel like I can watch it multiple times, like maybe once every couple of years, is like The Conjuring 2, the one set in London.
Gosh.
I feel like that movie, I mean, I've seen that numerous times, but that movie is still kind of it's how I think a good horror movie should be put together. It is quite scary. The scares still hold up, I think. Whereas you're right, with this movie, once you've seen it, you've kind of seen it. And I think the only kind of thing kind of keeping this movie together for replay value is the characterization, and I just think the performances were very good. And I found most of the characters quite likable, so I think maybe for that alone, but you know, I would go back. But I think what this movie does is it has that kind of, it kind of lives with you after you've watched the movie, where you could be outside, or maybe you just, I don't know, if you're looking at someone walking in a straight line with, you know, walking with purpose or whatever, you might think, oh crap, whose house are they going to, or who are they going to go and kill now? It's just, so it's one of those movies that lives with you afterwards. And I suppose it would have been nice to have a bit more meat on the bone with the story, like see all those other characters, like, you know, for example, like the three guys on the speedboat, or you know, it would have been nice to maybe see a few more deaths, or like really graphic deaths, like, because the girl who dies at the beginning of the movie, you know, you see the kind of aftermath of her death and how she's kind of like twisted and whatnot. And you know, that guy, is it Greg, I think, the guy who lives across the road, he, you know, him kind of be murdered, but not a huge amount. I just think it would have been nice to see a bit more of what the beast is, or the demon or whatever, is capable of, so you kind of fear it a little bit more. And maybe there was a little part of me that was hoping that they would somehow link back to the girl from the beginning of the movie, and maybe some of that would have been explained a little bit, or you know, even
like follow the chain back a little bit, like Smile, like investigate it a bit. And
I think that's something that Smile does well, I think, where there's like a mystery that's unraveling, and you know, whereas there was no real mystery, we just kind of accept that a demon exists.
Well, we just get told, don't we, at the beginning? You know, we just get told by the person who's, you know, giving it that this is what it is. There's no kind of figuring it out.
And it's not even like you need, you know, you don't need all the answers to a story, especially a horror movie. Sometimes you don't need to know the origin of the demon, like within Smile, for example. You don't get to find out the origin of the demon, but it would have been nice to have some kind of, or maybe, so you know, when Jay is in the wheelchair and the guy who passed the, you know, the STD onto her, he explains all the rules to her then. But it would have been nice if that was, rather than just being a giant info dump, if it was somehow revealed as the story progressed and the characters, you know, there was some kind of revelation to the characters there, and us as an audience. I think that would have made it a bit more interesting. But it was just a giant info dump.
I think you're right. I think there's pros and cons to doing it both ways. Like it's sometimes nice to just have the information and work on it, but I think what this film lacks slightly is because if you're going to give us all the information at the beginning, then you can really have some really cool scenes of the following. I feel like you can really delve into it where you've got really long shots, and because there are a few that are super creepy where you see someone from very far away and they start walking towards the character, and those were really creepy.
Yes.
And because we had all of the knowledge, I do think that they could have done more with that, like do that a bit more, because those were the bits that like really got the kind of hairs on my neck standing up, because you're not going to see that in other films because of the nature of this demon. So if you are going to give us all the information at the beginning, then really utilize that and understand that we know what's going on from the beginning, so you can really freak us out. Whereas with Smile, because we're investigating it, you don't have to do all of the creepy stuff straight away because we're still figuring it out. But you kind of need to play with what you're giving the audience,
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that this movie was like made for like $1 million or something, which is
wow, so super low budget.
Yeah, like no budget virtually. And so I suppose they had to kind of work within the constraints. And I bet there was, I wouldn't be surprised if there was lots of the script they had to chop out because it was too expensive to shoot.
Yeah,
I suppose if you look at it with that lens, then they actually did a fantastic job with what little they had. And
maybe that's why they didn't do so many death scenes, because I imagine those would be quite expensive to do, like the special effects and everything like that. But I still feel like they could have done a few more of those long shots of people of the walking. I think like the creepiest bits for me was like when they were in the park and then the person that they thought might have been walking towards them you can see her from really far away. Walking dead towards the characters. You're like, turn around. And then it ends up not being it. But that scene was super creepy. And like the one where she's looking out the window in the classroom and that old man in the kind of hospital gown is walking across the campus. Like that's really scary. And I wish that we'd had a few more of those. Like even if it's just that we see it and they don't, kind of thing, where you just see somebody walking. They do it right at the end, which is really nice. Well, I guess the question is that person following them or not? Because sometimes you don't know. But we see it as an audience and they don't, and you kind of get really riled up because you're like, look behind you, like they're right there. So I think maybe that was just on second viewing and already understanding it, that you always want to be scared a little bit more. But obviously every film is limited to what they can do.
No, I agree with you. And I think, to anyone watching the movie casually, and if they only have the intention of watching this once, I think they're in for a good time. Like I think they will be entertained, and it does have scary moments and unsettling moments. And I think anyone watching this, if you're a fan of horror or whatever, I think you're in for a good time with this one.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's super creepy. Okay, so this is a question for you. What would you do in that situation? Like if you'd been told, so you've basically got three options, I suppose. You either give it to somebody else straight away and try and get them to give it to so many people that it can't get back to you. You live with it, or you run. What would you do?
Oh dear, such a difficult question, because it's like there's a part of me that doesn't want to give it to anyone else because I feel like it's unfair, like you're giving someone else a death sentence, because that's how I felt like when the guy gave it to Jay in the beginning. I was like, what is he doing? How dare he do that to her? Like, he has no right. And but then what if I had it and my plan was I wanted to have kids, I wanted to have a family, then suddenly just rules all that out because I don't want to put someone else through that. But then it's like, I don't know, it's such a difficult one. Ideally, I'd like to think I'd probably just live with it, or I could become some kind of superhero type person where I go around finding bad people and give it
and give it to them.
Just find
like a vigilante. But just weirdly has sex with all the people that are really bad.
All the villains, so like finding evil dictators and just
that's a good idea.
Maybe that's what the sequel should be. I don't know, but I don't know. I don't know what I don't think I would give it to anyone else. What about you?
Again, it's so tricky because even if you give it to somebody else, it could still come back to you because they could die and then you're right back in the same position you were in anyway. One of the things I was thinking, and I'm sure people have spoken about this, is why couldn't you just get on a plane and move to Australia? I'm guessing it can swim, but
we didn't see evidence.
We didn't see evidence of it.
Well, we saw it in the pool at the end.
But it wasn't swimming. Well, it was kind of. It kind of grabbed onto her, but it just jumped in the pool and then grabbed her. I mean, the first time I watched it, I thought they were going to explain that, because that was my first instinct, was like, well, why don't you just go to a different continent where there's a massive body of water in between you? And I thought there was going to be at least one scene where it is swimming towards them. Like when she saw that boat, I thought that the next scene was going to be she's on the boat and then it swims out to her and then she's like, oh my god, it can swim, kind of thing. And that would explain that, okay, even if you went from America to, I don't know, Asia or Australia, in 2 years' time, it would still get to you because it is just swimming in a direct line towards you. And that's really creepy. But it didn't explain that. So maybe it can't swim. I'll just do that and then it's over.
And also there's an inconsistency where throughout the movie they were like shooting the demon in the head or just shooting it generally, and it kind of just, you know, it was unaffected. It kind of just got back up and just carried on. Whereas at the end of the movie, it got shot whilst it was in the swimming pool. And it just seemed to just turn into a giant puddle of blood or a giant pool of blood. And so I wasn't quite sure what the logic there was. Like, is it if you shoot it underwater it dies, or is it if you... I couldn't understand.
It is kind of confusing. I mean, I didn't know whether the blood thing was more of just like a visual effect kind of thing of, I don't know. And that the last scene was that it's actually come back, even though they didn't think it would, kind of thing. But you're right.
Last bit's open to interpretation. Final scene.
And that's one of the things that's really cool about this demon is it could be nothing. It's very obvious in like paranormal films that a ghost's a ghost or a demon's a demon, but this is creepy because it's just normal. But I mean, in all of these films, it always, I guess, makes the audience think what they would do in that situation. And I mean, I think the most tactical thing to do is to kind of do what they suggested one of the characters was doing, which was having sex with prostitutes or having sex with somebody who would then pass it on quite a long chain. You're so far removed from the person.
That is a very interesting idea.
That it wouldn't... I think he considered it as he drove past them. I don't know if he did.
Because he turned the corner and then she started looking at him. The prostitute was looking at the boy and he was looking at her through the side mirror or something.
Which makes me think, oh, that's what he was thinking of. Like, this person will be able to pass it on a few times or whatever. But
because they end up doing it with like 1,000 different people or something, wouldn't they?
But then that doesn't really, because it would have to be the next. I love how we're getting into this really technical, but the prostitute would have to have sex with someone and it's them who has sex with somebody else, not the prostitute. Right. So like she would have to sleep with somebody that also is sleeping with those people, you know. And that's actually just made me think, maybe the reason why they said at the beginning, this is what it is because you probably would die straight away if you weren't told from the very beginning what this thing was, because it will just walk towards you like a normal thing and then just rip you to shreds. So maybe you do actually need to be told from the get-go, this is this thing that's following you. Otherwise, you're not going to get very far.
That is true, actually. It had to be the info dump.
It has to be an info dump. Otherwise, you could just be walking down the street and somebody walks straight towards you and you don't run away.
Because otherwise the very first person in the chain would have just died straight away and then the chain would end. But then,
I always think that. Why, how could they, what happens if that happens? You know, they must have started the chain somehow and then that person dies. And what if they haven't slept with anyone?
And what happens when the demon works its way right through the chain?
All hypotheticals that we cannot solve.
No. I think it's probably a good thing they didn't get too in depth with these questions, to be honest.
I feel like the only one I would have wanted answered is the swimming thing, because then it answers a lot of questions, because they only seem to drive to like one town over to get away from it, and then you know, all of a sudden, surprise surprise, it gets you, you know, because it's not that far to walk. It's like, you know, 12 hours or whatever if they're driving for ages. But even if they just moved across the country, well, they are children, I suppose, but teenagers, it does make you think.
No, absolutely. One thing I did like about the movie, and I suppose, I don't know, maybe if it was just a byproduct of having unknowns in the movie, other than the lead girl. She's in a few other bits and pieces. I forget her name. Maika Monroe, I think. It's like nobody was like hot hot in this movie.
No, they were
Like,
normal.
yeah, like usually in horror movies, like everyone's like mega hot, and in this movie, everyone is just like normal looking. Yeah, as you said, but I think what kind of made the characters work were just their personalities. I just thought they were so. I just found all the characters quite likable and all relatable to a degree or whatever. And I like how when Jay was going crazy, her friends, for a brief moment, thought she was going nuts, but they were very quick to be kind of supportive to her.
Yeah,
and they were very
yeah.
quick. Yeah, and they all behaved fairly realistically. None of them really behaved in a way where I thought, nah, you're being ridiculous. This is horror movie logic where everyone just, suddenly becomes an idiot. Like they were all reasonably smart. And,
yeah, I agree. I think it was refreshing, especially after. I mean, the whole point of Smile was to show that she's not being believed, but it is quite refreshing for people to just say, okay, we believe you. And I think at the beginning they were probably thinking, if you think it's real to us, kind of thing. So we will help you. And then they realize, oh, it is actually real. But they were still supporting her the whole time.
Yeah, I think once that beach scene had happened.
Oh yeah, because something physical happened.
Yeah. I think that's another thing I really liked about this movie is just how disarming so many of the scenes were. Like even how that beginning scene when that girl dies at the beginning of the movie. Like they could have totally not even had that scene and it still would have worked. Like when you see the date at the cinema at the beginning and they're just talking about, oh, which character would you be, and it's all fairly just a bit of lightheartedness or whatever, and then suddenly he goes, that girl in the yellow dress, and there's no one there. That's when I was like, okay, yeah. Maybe that would have been a better opening movie, I guess. Like just sent a shiver down my spine when I watched that bit.
Yeah, and especially when you don't know what's coming like that. You've got so many unanswered questions. Why is he seeing things that other people can't? Like, is this going to be a story about him? What's going on? Yeah, I agree. I really loved the cast in this. The only person I recognized was Paul, because he's in a show called Atypical. I've never seen it, but I recognized him. The only person that really I did not think was needed was the girl who spoke about poetry a lot. So there was like two girls.
The one who got shot at the end?
Yeah, the one that got shot at the end. I honestly feel like it was a superfluous character.
Yes,
like everything that happened to her could have happened to her sister, Jay's sister. And it just felt like, unless you were going to use her for added something, I thought that it was going to be passed around to all of those people in some way, because there were so many extra characters. You had 4 extra characters on top of Jay throughout it. I kind of thought that they were going to be used to show how this thing can jump from one person to another, kind of thing. And it really annoyed me at the end, where there's like a whole scene where she's reading poetry in the hospital bed, and I'm just thinking, like, you didn't do anything in the film, you didn't add anything to the film, then we have to listen to you reading poetry. It was like I couldn't understand what the point was of having her here.
That's a good point, actually. It's when you have all those characters in a story like this, you'd think some of them are going to be cannon fodder, and some of them are going to make it through the end, and there was no real cannon fodder, really.
I mean, it wasn't obvious what was going to happen to Greg, but it made sense that you would have at least one of the characters showing how dangerous this thing is to everybody else. And I think Paul was a really great character, because I felt really sorry for him, and he's just a kid and he's finding his way, and he made a massive sacrifice for Jay. And I understand that her sister is there to support her, and she is that person who kind of like, will make sure that she's okay. And then there's just this other character who...
I felt like with Paul's character, I think if you speak to any, maybe even young girls as well, but if you speak to any like young boy, I think they've all been that character at some point when they're
pining over a girl.
Yeah, when they're crushes with other people and watching them, like it's. I think that's been all of us, really, to some degree or another. So.
And I think that's what makes this film so nostalgic in a way, and timeless, because you're right, there's a little bit of it that could have happened to anybody, even Jay, or trying to find her way and starting to date and then having really bad experiences and all of this stuff. It's just things that happen when you're a teenager. And I like that this film didn't just base itself solely on its scary factor, and that it's almost like a coming of age film at the same time.
Yes. It's talking about timelessness. Like, I couldn't quite place the time that the film was in, because at first I thought, okay, this is modern day, whatever. But then there was that kind of filmic quality to the visuals.
Yeah.
And and I just thought that was maybe just an artistic choice. But then and then I was actually going to ask you sorry, I'm going on another tangent here, but there's that little clamshell phone looking thing that one of the girls using. I wanted to ask if you knew what that was, but
I have no idea. I just thought it was like a Kindle, but it's so small that you'd only be able to read like 4 words at a time.
It was like the size of like one of those little foundation things.
It was like a compact mirror. It was tiny. Yeah, but I picked that up as well, and I think it makes this film quite timeless because you can't place it. It's not modern day because they don't use phones. They don't have smartphones.
No.
The cars, I always find that cars are quite a good indicator of what the time period is. But again, it's kind of a truck.
I think what threw me was every TV in the movie was one of the, like a tube TV, like a big chunky TV. Yeah. And then the appliances they were using, like in the swimming pool scene and whatnot, were all like kind of retro-y kind of appliances.
Yeah, there's like a typewriter as well. Like they were like super old ones as well. I think it's intentionally ambiguous.
Yes. And I think the whole thing just had this kind of nightmarish nostalgia about it. And I couldn't quite, I mean, I don't even know if that phrase makes sense, but it's just...
No, I totally get what you mean. I thought it was kind of like, it's this Americana, living, even though it's not living in trailers, it is that idea, going hunting, going fishing, all of these things that make up old America from the 80s kind of all blending into this. And I think it just means that it will stand the test of time. And the fact that you were surprised that it was made in 2014 probably is a testament to the fact that it doesn't...
it totally holds up. It totally holds up. It's like, in terms of the visuals, just the visual color choices and it felt like it was shot on film. There was this kind of grain that I really like. And I would, in terms of the visual departments, I would rate it above like any of the Marvel movies. Like, it's just in terms of, I think for the low budgetness, the visual quality, like the visuals for the movie were very good.
Absolutely. But I think that comes from the fact that it is grainy and it's real and it's raw. That, I think that's what makes it so good, is because it is very realistic.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, they allowed the moments to kind of sink in and breathe, and there wasn't this big rush to cut, like move the camera and keep changing the angles every couple of seconds. Like, it was just very, like, I got the geography of the locations they were in. I just, just everything was allowed to breathe, and I appreciate that. Yeah,
absolutely. I loved the zooming in effect that they do quite often in the film, because it's like the camera is following the characters, just like It Follows. You're seeing it follow, and it does a lot of panorama kind of turns, and I think that gives the audience a chance to scope out the backgrounds. Like, is there going to be something in the background? Oh, what's going on? Like, we try and take stock of what's going on.
Yeah, and a lot of the time the backgrounds were kind of like out of focus, a bit blur, and you try to see if you can pick out something in the background. The whole thing felt very voyeuristic. The entire experience did, and I think it's trying to show the point of view of the follower or the stalker or whatever. So
yeah, definitely. And I think, what I like about this film as well is that it is a horror film, but also I think people who don't like horror would enjoy this film as well, because there aren't many supernatural elements to it, really. There's a few things like you can't see it, or, things like that. But really, it's kind of like a stalker film, like a thriller, that they have to try and figure out what the story is. And I think some people don't like horror films because of the ghosts, and that they don't believe in these things, and that it's a little bit cheesy. But this film is not cheesy. And I think that that's what makes it quite unique in the horror space, because you can enjoy it even if horror is not the thing that you typically like to watch.